This podcast is supported by listeners like you. We're grateful for your tax-deductible donation at newthoughtphilly.org or the link in the episode description.
A practical prayer is a prayer that works.
These discussions between Reverend Bill Marcioni and Carol Lawrence dive into the details of how it works and how to work it.
Reverend Bill is a New Thought minister and the author of Practical Prayer for Real Results.
Your new life begins with a new thought.
Carol Lawrence is on a spiritual quest, finding the New Thought teaching after decades on the pulpit in 3 different traditional denominations.
I've got some questions.
Together, they're exploring the philosophy and activities that come together from many of the world's religions to create the practical spirituality that is New Thought.
Welcome to the Practical Prayer Podcast. I'm Carol, here with Reverend Dr. Bill Marcioni. Hi.
Hey there. So we have another exciting conversation to have, and you've got a few ideas that are queued up, and a leading question that you revealed to me just a little bit. So we got some stuff for this episode. I am looking forward to it.
Me too. So it goes all the way back to when I first got in your first class on the practical prayer. And we were going through all the steps. And I could not figure out who we're praying to. I know from my journey, I understand the God out there, that out there. And you pray to that God out there. But clearly in the practical prayer and the affirmative prayer and in the world of New Thought, it's not a God out there, but it's the God that's in here. God lives inside of us and so forth, which is an amazingly beautiful thought, but we just have to leave it at that right now. So,
because we'd use up the whole episode just talking about that.
Yeah, which might be really, really valuable at the next opportunity that we do it. But anyway, I really got so confused with the gratitude step because I understand gratitude. But if God is not out there somewhere and I'm a co-creator and all of that I was learning at that time, I could not understand. And I think I kept asking you, well, who exactly am I praying to? Because this is a prayer and we're talking in step 1, we're, acknowledging and then identifying with God. Well, it never felt like I was talking to God as I understood it. So I thought that it might be a good thing to talk about that.
Okay. And it actually ties together with the gratitude step. Because if you are expressing gratitude, what is the most common way of saying it?
Thank you.
Right.
Right.
And when we're expressing gratitude, a lot of times we say thank you. And there is an implicit assumption in there because you is the second person. And when I say thank you, that means I'm thanking something outside of myself. Mm-hmm. So back in the 70s, I think there was the movie with George Burns playing God. And I don't know if you remember that one.
I do.
And he got called onto the stand and they swore him under oath. And they said, you repeat after me, I swear to tell the whole truth, et cetera, so help me God. And he says, so help me.
Yeah.
And that's true for all of us. It's not a God you out there. It is, and the other way to say, to express gratitude is, I am grateful. Mm-hmm. And that zeroes it in a little bit better because that's talking about me. I am grateful. What am I grateful for? Didn't include that. Who am I grateful about? Didn't include that. Why am I grateful? No, I'm just grateful. I am grateful. And the fun thing is that we can feel gratitude without having a thing or an object or a person or something that is the focus of that gratitude. We can just feel gratitude.
That's that's rather mature, I think, in spirituality and growth, to just be grateful. I mean, yeah. I remember when I needed something to focus on. And I didn't want to focus on, I was trying not to focus on anything that I knew about before, because I was trying to learn, everything new. And
you wanted to color outside the lines.
Yeah. So the first thing I thought of, and it made so much sense, is to be grateful to know these things. Grateful to know the things that gave me my freedom to just be free and to know more and more and more, endlessly more. So I was so grateful for that. But then again, I'm not grateful. It wasn't being grateful to God. It didn't feel like you were teaching us to be grateful to God, but to be just simply grateful, period. Right? Yeah.
Well, let's do the exercise. This is actually a fun one because of the 5 or 7 steps in a practical prayer. There's one that you can actually feel in your body. So what I'd love everybody to do, and if you're driving a car or operating heavy machinery, it's like, really? While you're listening to this podcast? Okay. I mean, I guess I understand the driving a car. In that case, do not close your eyes, but understand what the experience is. And for everybody else, close your eyes or do what you do to turn away from the world around you and just become aware of yourself being present in this moment, right here, right now. Feel yourself sitting in your chair, surrounded by the space that you're in. Take a deep breath. Let it go. Let that be the cleansing breath. Continue breathing. And conjure up for yourself the feeling of feeling grateful. Feel that feeling of gratitude. And you can prime the pump a little bit by bringing to mind a person or a beloved pet or a favorite vacation spot or a beautiful sunset that you once saw, something that allows you to bring about that feeling of gratitude. Let yourself feel grateful. Feel where it gets located in your body. For some people, it's in our gut. It touches us way deep down. Some people, it's in our chest. It touches our hearts. For some folks, it just makes us choke up. We feel it in our throats. And for others, it's in the eyes. The feeling of gratitude brings tears to your eyes. Just feel that feeling of gratitude. And notice whether it feels pleasant or unpleasant, demanding or freeing. Take another deep breath. Feel it even more deeply. Feel that feeling of gratitude. And as you let your breath go, allow your awareness to come back into the world around you. And the important part of the gratitude step in a prayer and gratitude in a spiritual practice is that we don't have to be grateful for something or to someone or about a noun, a person, place, or thing, or a verb, an activity we've been involved in. We can just be grateful. And when we get to that step in the prayer, we can be grateful for the good that's already coming into our lives as a result of the prayer. We can be grateful for this new spiritual activity that we're involved in. We can be grateful for our awareness of the process. We can be grateful for the person who first brought us to the New Thought teaching, or for whatever. It doesn't make any difference. It is the tone and the feeling of gratitude, of being in that space of thankfulness, that is the important part in a spiritual practice in general and a practical prayer in particular.
Okay. I get that. I think I'm still stuck on the word prayer and that definition. Maybe it's in my subconscious that we're talking to God. And then I think about Neil Donald Walsch talking about conversations with God.
Conversation.
Yeah.
And interestingly, he was sitting there with a legal pad writing both sides of the conversation. So that's either spiritual enlightenment or schizophrenia.
Which is yeah. So it's kind of wrestling with God being outside or inside, But then, on the other hand, it led me to this pantheism, which says God is everywhere, God is in everything. And so then when we pray, we're not exactly praying with the conventional definition or thought of it. We're expressing. Is that fair to say?
Oh, yeah. And in conventional prayer, and this, by the way, over the course of the last 160 episodes or whatever this has been most challenging for me, is that we're not praying to something outside of ourselves. We're praying to something that is indwelling. We're not praying to connect ourselves to our spiritual source. When we get into the prayerful practice, what we're doing is we're reminding ourselves that we're not separate from it. There's a huge illusion that we are out here disconnected from spirit. And traditional prayer means I got to connect to spirit. Mm-hmm. And practical prayer and New Thought prayer is I got to remind myself that spirit's right here.
That makes a difference. I mean, just that statement makes a huge difference, because that was the other thing, when we first started, I kept saying, well, who am I praying to? It really seems like I'm talking to me, like I'm reassuring myself, but I already know there's a God, so I don't need to be reassuring myself. Man, it was rough. And I couldn't always ask the question, because then I'd be hogging up all the class time and your time. And I just went through it. And I kept thinking, as far as I can see, this is me talking to me, reminding myself of certain things and getting to the affirmation part. It's reminding myself of the possibilities and denying the impossibilities. Or, yeah. Just denying the negative.
Denying the belief that something is impossible.
Yes.
And our monkey minds are really good at telling us what can't possibly happen. And they're so wrong.
So the prayer is really jostling with the monkey mind.
Yep.
Because it is.
Yeah.
It is. Okay.
Well, human experience is set up in such a way that we really have to work to feel our connection with spirit. All of our senses tell us that we are separate and distinct and apart from everything else in the world. There's me in here and there's everything else out there. Mm-hmm. And if we're getting into competition, then it's a zero-sum game, because if something out there has the goodies that I want, then that means I don't have them. And that's a huge assumption that there's a fixed amount of goodies. There are not. There's more goodies out there that are available. We don't have to compete. We can, but we don't have to. The good that we're looking for when we're looking to have a loving relationship, it's not like we're going to go and turn over a rock and suddenly there's going to be this person who's willing to love us. When we get into the alignment of the understanding that I am lovable and important and deserve a loving relationship, then suddenly I'm going to come in contact with somebody who feels the same way about themselves and is looking for exactly that mirror to fit into. And there's where the relationship happens. Mm-hmm. But the spirit is not manufacturing somebody who's fully grown to be loved in a relationship with us. It's not a supply issue. It's a distribution issue.
A distribution issue. Okay.
That's right. 8 billion people on the planet. Then you want to have a loving relationship with one of them. It's just about, I haven't met all 8 billion of them. Or if I have particular desires, then maybe it's only half. Maybe it's only 2 billion that meet my criteria. Still a lot of people.
So really, I don't want to say you're talking to yourself, but in a way, you're talking to your mind and pulling yourself in alignment and your mentality in alignment with the divine mind.
Yeah. I'm reminding myself that divine presence, that God essence is within. And it's an inherent part of me. It's not something that's out there that I get to have access to. It's something that's part of me. I'm reminding myself that it's part of me. And then I am communicating with that part of me that's within. That divine presence, that divine connection that's within. So am I talking to myself? Yes and no.
Yeah, but you're actually making it a bit clearer, because I'm talking to the divine connection, or that divine part of me that is within. And that's a good place to start if you have to unravel some other kinds of thoughts, and say, listen, God is within, right? Because I always, I point, people to the scripture that talks about God within. And it's always very interesting to me how when you can find certain scriptures and it sounds really good and then you go somewhere else and it's totally different. And so I used to think, everybody close your ears to this. I used to say, look, this is just great poetry, because it sounds so beautiful, but you can't live it, because when it gets down to where the rubber meets the road, we go somewhere to another scripture. And I'm thinking, with all due respect, and I'm really still sensitive about other people. I'm cool with myself, but with all due respect, I'm not saying that the scripture is not clear and not true. I'm saying that there's some clarity that we can bring to the idea of God being within. What does that actually mean beyond just beautiful words? If that is so, then what you're saying, coming to a place of understanding, agreement, alignment with the God that is within, makes tremendous sense. You just can't breeze through that.
No, that's. I think that's a really important part of it. That's really important. Let's take a break, and when we continue, we will discuss what we think a tree is made of, among other things.
Learn to put practical prayer to work in your life. The steps are simple to learn and let you begin to get real results to create the life of your dreams immediately. Reverend Bill Marcione's widely acclaimed book, Practical Prayer for Real Results, gives you a clear summary of the New Thought principles behind practical prayer and the series of easy-to-understand steps found in the most effective prayers from religions and spiritual practices all over the world and throughout history. Practical prayer is not a replacement for your religion or practice. It's a technique to make the work you do in consciousness even more effective. The book includes 40 prayers on various topics that you can adapt as needed and use as your own. Practical Prayer for Real Results is available in paperback, Kindle, and audiobook on Amazon or at b-the-light.com. That's b-the-light.com.
Welcome back to the Practical Prayer Podcast. I'm Carol, here with Reverend Dr. Bill Marcione, and we're a tree.
I asked you a leading question. What is a tree made of?
Wood, that's all I know.
That's right. And that is what most people will say, that a tree is made of wood. And in fact, an oak table is made of wood. Mm-hmm. A tree is made of tree. That's like saying my body is made of flesh. Well, there's much more to it than that. There's different structures, there's different fluids, there's different enzymes that they form into organs. There's a lot of nuance to what makes a person a person. And there's a lot of nuance that makes a tree a tree. And to say that the tree is made of wood is reducing it down to a vast oversimplification. Mm-hmm. And the same thing happens. It's like, are we made of spirit? We are spirit. We're not made of spirit. We are spirit. We are the way that spirit is incarnating. So when we are doing our prayer work and getting involved in a spiritual practice, what we're doing is we're being trees, getting in touch with the fact that we're trees. We are spirit, and we're getting in touch with the fact that we're spirit, and we're having a physical body and a physical experience, and we're living on a timeline, and all of that stuff is added unto it. But at the very heart and core, we are spirit, and there's only one spirit. So we are connected with that one spirit, and the practice is to get away from the distraction that the body is the big difference, and that the bank account is the big difference, and that where we're living on our timeline is the big difference. Those are all important parts of living our human life. And at the heart and core, our tree is made of tree.
Yeah. You know what? One of the things that made me go this way, I was reading Confucius this week.
Of course you were.
I was trying to figure out how to say this without saying this.
I looked at the cartoons this week. You're reading Confucius. Okay, you continue.
But it was so interesting because I had a perception of Confucius. Because, when I was growing up, the thing used to be Confucius said. So I said, well, let me just see something about this guy, because I interview everybody that I read. That's why I want to, get you out. I interview everybody that I read. And that's a whole nother wooey story. But anyway.
It works. It works for you. So keep it up. It works
for me. So I was just dumbfounded that this guy was different than I thought. I had a whole perception of him. And he's so grounded in the practicality of life. And I just had him somewhere else. And I'm thinking, how does that work, right? We are spirit. We live in a world that is just practical. Sometimes the two don't mesh. And then we got to pray. So we got to pray and figure out how the heck do we reconcile what's going on inside of me with what is going on in this world space. I know that there are a lot of folks that are confused, and I'm like, let me get this practical prayer thing out here to answer God. And I think you use the term wrapped around the axle. You can get
I've used that on occasion, yeah.
Yeah, you get wrapped around the axle with the stuff that's going on, and to remember that we are connecting, or as you say, reminding ourselves of our connection with God. That gets, that moves things along fairly well. I got to talk to Confucius a little bit more because I think he needs practical prayer. A little.
So back to your childhood. Confucius say what?
Believe me, it makes sense and it fits in. It's just kind of, roundabout. He raised questions about all of this. And, he said, stop being so worried about spiritual matters. If you can't handle life matters, you don't need to worry about spiritual matters. And I'm thinking, if we're spiritual people, and we have to be concerned about spiritual matters and to think in that way, in that language and in that understanding and in the context of spirituality, in order for us to function at some level of success, which is not the right word, but best I can do right now. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. Yes. Yeah. That's better. That's better. Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. That's another metaphor, because they are either very helpful or they change the subject so much that nobody can figure out what the hell I'm talking about. And this time it'll be actors. So somebody is an actor and they're playing a part in a play or a show or a movie or a total immersion experience, whatever. And what they really need to do is nail the role and be able to play that part really effectively and convincingly and deeply. And if they want to write the sequel to the play, they really got to get their acting part together first. And if they want to understand how to produce shows and how to, direct and the rest of it, you really need to get your own part taken care of first before you have those feelings of grandeur. Oh, yes, I want to accept a Tony Award for this one. You should make it past the intermission. And the same thing is true for us as human beings and growing into our spiritual experience. We have a human experience and we need to deal with it. That's our acting job. We need to play our part and bring what we're bringing to this role in life, and then we get to look at the bigger picture. And if we try and skip over it and say, "Oh, well, I'm going to skip all that human stuff, and I'm just going to pay attention to spirituality," we're probably kidding ourselves, because something will slip through the cracks there.
Yeah, I think a lot will do that.
Yeah.
I was reading somebody not too long ago, and they said that people hide in spirituality, so that becomes their total conversation and total focus and all that. And I thought, okay, so that might be an escape from reality, but that doesn't help you when the difficult times come. It's kind of saying it backwards, because when difficulty comes, people, the whole line is that you pray and God will fix it, or you pray for God to fix it. But I don't think that that's quite correct. I think we should have some understanding, some level of understanding of the reality that we're living in. We didn't come here just to be in a cocoon until it's time to go. We came here to be human. And and remembering who we are in practical prayer, I think that's what helps to connect, for me, who I am in this earth, realistic, feet on the ground space.
Yeah, and kind of what you're talking about is foxhole prayers. Where people go along, they don't particularly have a spiritual life. They've been to church, Christmas and Easter, and whenever there's a wedding. And other than that, they pretty much don't pay attention to it. And then they find themselves in a foxhole with live gunfire overhead. And they start doing a prayer. "Oh God, if you get me out of this, if I survive this, then I'll," you start bargaining with God. "Oh God, out there, if you get me out of this, then I'll go to church every Sunday." It's like, God says, obviously you don't think God's in church. You think God's in the foxhole. But okay, you do that. And then what happens to the people who do that prayer and promise that they're going to go to church and live an uplifting life, and then they get out of the foxhole and everything is fine, and they don't do it?
I got stories.
We know people who've done that, right?
I got stories.
Okay. All right. And the fact of the matter is, God doesn't care.
Yeah.
Because we are trees made of tree. We are spiritual beings having a human experience. And if we forget that we're spiritual beings having a human experience, it doesn't change the nature of what's going on. We're still spiritual beings having a human experience, but we forgot. And now we get to go through life acting as though the only thing that matters is what's going on in the physical world around us. And we can. And some of us do.
Yeah. I remember I told you that I used to, in my party days, which really didn't last a long time, but, I went places at times, and I would tell God, stand outside here.
You wait here. I'm going to go do something that you shouldn't know about.
You don't need to be in on this. I actually believed that. That was okay. Or I'd say, listen, wait in the car, because the car is not going to be good by itself, right? Where it is. I can make it back to the car because somebody can walk me. But, I'd have this whole thing worked out. That's not That's God conscience. That's being conscious that there is a God, but not very realistic in terms of living with that reality. It's not until you see yourself as God being in you and you're a part of it, and I don't care how you put it, merged, mushed together. That's when it makes a difference, right? So I keep thinking, I took God in there. Oh my God, God really. I was thinking, wow, it's a whole evolution of thought, because when I think about it, I say, oh wow. When I used to think about it, I took God in there. Oh, he must have had a lot to say about that. But then you move on and see that no, it's the human experience that the spirit went in with, and you come to terms with it. I did it more than once, I mean,
well,
that was
makes the lifestyle. It's something to grow out of.
But I really didn't, because I would alternatively, I think, okay, it's cool for God to go in the supermarket with me. So when I wasn't doing the club thing anymore, it was still deciding where God goes. Well, now you can go with me everywhere. But that's, but that's,
so much to talk about there. Like, if you can tell God where God can and can't go, who's in charge of the relationship? And really, you're in charge of God? That's
what I thought,
I understand. And I'm going to, before we take another break, going to go through the intellectual exercise of leaving God outside the club. Because in this teaching, basically, the whole idea is the idea of oneness. There is only God. There is only that one divine essence. And it can be the God that's in Scripture. In the beginning, there was darkness and void, and God said, let there be light. And then there's light. And the light came from God, because there was nothing else. The light didn't manufacture itself out of darkness and void, because it was dark and void. So, same story in the Big Bang. There was only the singularity that began expanding. Everything came from that one. So as you are parking the car outside of the club and you're telling God to stay in the car, you're going to go into this club. You know what the club's made of? God essence. You know who built the club? Divine expression of God. You know who's DJing and tending bar and doing all the other things that you don't want God to say? It's all divine expressions of God. So God is not only not going to miss out on any of this, God can't. So, and if you want to believe that you can leave God in the car, God's okay with that. You can't do it, but God's okay with you believing it.
I think so. I think so, because often when I'm sharing some things with people and they're not able to understand it, it's okay, because eventually you will. I mean, you don't have to. You can leave here and not understand it. It doesn't mean it's not true. Somebody told me once, well, you act like you don't care. I do care very much, but I'm not. You know what? I pastored for over 30 years, and I'll tell you this. I was never a good evangelist. Never. I would share with you, and you decide what you want to do. I never felt like I had to threaten you into to the kingdom, or, scare you to death. The devil's going to get you and you're going to burn in hell. I never felt like that. I shared with somebody recently. I set a buffet table. I set the table. You're welcome to have whatever you like. If you don't want this and you rather eat over there, we're still friends.
Have at it.
You're still friends. So that doesn't always go over very well, but I still have that same feeling, even about New Thought, because I think that what is true, and you will eventually understand it. I don't want us to not be friends because you don't want to understand something right now, or you understand differently. Yeah.
And there are 31 flavors of Baskin Robbins and 8 billion people on the planet, and it's not like one of them being the best makes any of the rest of them be wrong. They're all just different. Let us take that long promised break, and then we're going to do a prayer on awareness of what we're praying to. It's Reverend Bill letting you know that the Practical Prayer for Real Results class is now available on demand. That's right, you can take it at your own pace, anytime you want. All of the information is at BeTheLight.com. That's B-the-light.com. You know where to find that stuff. The class is 5 lessons, broken down into 18 modules, and you can take them at whatever pace is comfortable for you. As you work through the process, it starts out with the theory, goes into the practice, there are experiential activities and exercises, and at the end of the program, you will wind up with an understanding of how practical prayer works, and a practical prayer for yourself that will work to create transformation in your life. And as you know, it works for everything. Take a look at the class online at BeTheLight.com. There's a sample lesson so you can see how the class is going to work for you, and then dive in. The great news is it's on sale now. You can register and save $20 off of the regular price. I'm looking forward to seeing you in class.
Welcome back to the Practical Prayer Podcast. I'm Carol, here with Reverend Dr. Bill Marcioni. Great conversation.
We're going to do a prayer. Yeah, it's a great conversation today about who am I praying to, or what am I praying to? And the interesting thing is we don't need to answer that question before we start praying. We can pray about anything. We can pray for anything. And this prayer is about being even more aware of that divine presence that our prayers are focused to and that are creating that newness in our lives. So let's go ahead and close our eyes and otherwise turn away from the world around us and do so in a manner that's safe and comfortable for you. Because when we turn away from the world outside, we are freer to focus on that divine power and presence that dwells within. As we let loose our attachment to what's going on in the world around us, we can become more receptive to the bigger picture, to the nuance, to the subtlety. And the fact is, there is one creative power, one divine presence, one love that shares itself as all of its creation. And we can talk about the story of Genesis or any of the other scripture that talks about where this all came from. It all came from one source, one presence, one power, one love that is sharing itself as every facet of its creation. The story can come from the Big Bang, which is the same story told in the mystical language of quantum physics. That in the beginning there was a singularity, one very dense point of matter and energy that's been expanding and exploding since the beginning of time. And it's all that one. So everything that exists everywhere is that one presence, that one divine presence, that one creative force, that one infinite love, that one limitless energy. Because there's nowhere else that it could come from. There is no alternate source possible. Everything can be traced back to that one divine creative expression that has continued creating and continued evolving and continued unfolding since then. So as we engage in this practical prayer, we can open our awareness to that divine creative power that creates everything and know that it indwells us. It's not available to us. It's not something we can go call upon and have that's out there somewhere. When we turn our awareness to spirit, we connect to that divine power and presence which is already within us. It is the essence of what and who we are. And that creative power that creates galaxies is creating this next new experience in our lives as well. Goodness and newness and freshness and uplift. Harmony and love, creativity and joy, prosperity and health. Good and more good is accessible and available to us as that infinite creative power that abides within co-creates that newness with us and for us and as us. We are participants in this. If there are steps to be taken, we're guided to take those steps. If there's activity to be engaged in, we are guided in those activities. And if there's something for us to let go of, we are guided in our surrender so that we can make room for something different. And that's how love unfolds. And that's what's happening for each of us in our own way. Embodying an even fuller, richer, deeper awareness of the connection that we have to that divine power and presence, aware of that divine essence that we are praying to and praying with and praying as. And I'm so grateful for it. Deeply grateful for the good that's already coming about. Deeply grateful for the wonderful ways that it's uplifting each of us. And deeply grateful to be able to speak this word of intention, of invitation, of opening, and release it into that creative law, that same creative law that creates everything, and to know it's now creating this. And so, I let it be. And so it is.
The Practical Prayer Podcast with Reverend Bill Marcioni and Carol Lawrence is a production of BeTheLight.com.
be-the-light.com,
where you can find more information about practical prayer for real results.
Our theme is by Music of Wisdom. You can learn about the spiritual community of New Thought Philadelphia with daily guided meditations,
Weekly celebrations of spirit,
and Reverend Bill's classes in practical spirituality
at newthoughtphilly.org.
This podcast is supported by listeners like you. We're grateful for your tax-deductible donation at newthoughtphilly.org or the link in the episode description.